All right. Okay. So I think we are on, and it seems like everybody's ready to go. And so, hi everybody. Thank you all for coming to the webcast. This is the accounting and consulting webinar that Out for Undergrad is hosting for today. And my name is Daisuke Kojitani. I'm the consulting cohort leader, and we're gonna first start off with some introductions, and then I'll go through what the webinar entails, and also how you can answer questions and things like that. So I'll start off by introducing myself. Again, my name is Daisuke. I'm the consulting cohort leader, and I'm a student at UC Berkeley. I'm studying business administration there, and I got involved through OUBC last year. I went to the conference and really liked what the organization had to offer, and so here I am involved in this. And over the summer, I'm going to be working at NBC. My interest. So I think we are on. Oh. And it seems like everybody's ready to go. And so everybody, thank you all for coming to the podcast. All right. I just need to turn off the video that was running in the background. Okay. So with that, I'm going to be working in New York, and part of my interest is in media and entertainment, but I'll also be recruiting for consulting in the fall. So that's that. So that's my introduction. And Jake, do you want to start off with your introduction?
Sure. My name is Jake Hill. I'm the accounting cohort mentor. I got involved with OUBC actually on the recruiting side as a representative when I worked at Ernst & Young. So I was there for about 2.5 years and now work at Colgate-Palmolive, also on the finance and accounting side. I am in New York City, and I guess I've been involved with OUBC for about 2 years now.
Great. Thanks, Jake. And Bobby?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Bobby McWatters. I actually attended 2 OUBCs, well, 3 rather. I attended 2 as a student and then 1 as a representative for BCG. I guess professionally, I was a summer associate with BCG in 2011 and then joined full-time this past September. Since joining, I've done a bunch of work in consumer insight with a focus around luxury, beauty, fashion, and consumer more broadly.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. And finally, Anne.
Hi, everybody. My name is Anne. I am currently a second-year associate consultant in the Bain San Francisco office. I actually didn't do OUBC as an undergrad. Instead, I worked with Marco Chan, who is fairly active in OUBC, to say the least, last year at Bain. I graduated from Berkeley in 2011, and in my time at Bain, I've concentrated mainly on retail and e-commerce, with about 9 months in the private equity group here as well.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, and Anne's the consulting cohort mentor, so she's the professional mentor for the consulting cohort, and I'm the student leader for this. So we work together to put on these webinars, and then Jake is the accounting cohort mentor, so he's putting on the accounting side of this, and we collaborated for this. Okay, sounds good. So you guys are all here to, hear a little bit of a discussion on managing your identity at work, what's it like to be gay or be out in a professional setting. And then we're also going to be covering some recruiting tips for those that are going to be recruiting for the fall and for the spring for internships, as well as any kind of tips for how you can create your summer internship in the best way possible, how you can take advantage of those resources available for that. All right, so I'm going to be asking questions, and feel free, if you want to ask questions, feel free to post anything on the Google Hangout event page or the YouTube page, and I'll be also taking questions from there as well. Okay, sounds good. So the first question for the panel here is, are you out at work and or at the client site, and did you face any sort of problems? Let's just start off with Jake.
Yeah, actually, both at Ernst & Young and Colgate, I am out at work. I didn't face any problems. I mean, I have pictures in my cube of my boyfriend and I, and never really made much of a big deal out of it. I didn't make like an announcement and get everyone together and say, hey, guess what, everyone? But, it was sort of a natural process, and I never felt like I couldn't talk about it openly with my coworkers.
Okay, great. Bobby?
Yeah, so my story was pretty similar to Jake. I'm also very out at work, but it's not like I wear a sign or kind of make a huge announcement of it. I would say, generally when I join a new team, always questions around your weekend or what do you like to do outside of the office. I guess the first great way of getting to know your teammates, and inevitably I always talk about my boyfriend and kind of the time that we spend together. So I'm very open about it. And it's even something that comes up more informally. So, it came up in a case team meeting that we had, kind of, whether or not we had a significant other. And I was actually surprised. It was my first interaction with a team at BCG, and they used significant other rather than assuming, girlfriend or boyfriend. So people are really very excited.
Yeah, Anne?
Great. Yeah, I think it's pretty common these days at most firms to be very comfortable being out. I think one thing to think about is as a consultant especially, the client side can be a bit of a different place to be out. It can be a bit more difficult to think about that. So for me, like my most recent client was a fairly conservative Midwestern client, business formal dress. But I was still very comfortable and open about being out, and the team I was with was very supportive of that as well. So I think that, both in the office, it's, we have a great group called Beagle Lab, just like our sort of affinity network. But really there's support for being out at the client side as well. And that's a really nice thing about the major consulting firms, is they're very comfortable and very on your side if there ever is a, problem with the client, which there rarely is.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks for the answers. And so the next question is regarding your clients. So among your clients, which industry tends to be the most LGBT friendly, would you say? And anyone can take this one.
So I can start that off. I guess so. One of my friends,
from my perspective. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And okay, Jake, you want to go?
I would just say I had a little bit of a diverse experience in the sense of when I first started at EY, I was primarily on like consumer products, retail type clients. And then when I moved to New York initially, I was on financial services clients, so hedge funds, PE type stuff. I would say there's a difference mainly in the sense that in the retail consumer goods side, it was fairly open. I mean, I never felt like I couldn't discuss it. The difference I noticed in FSO was more, not that I couldn't discuss it, but that people were a little less apt to discuss their personal lives at all. I think the FSO was sort of a unique industry in the sense that it's a little less personal discussion and a little more work. But outside of that, I mean, I think you'll see in retail and consumer products, maybe it's more understood just from an proximity and experience perspective.
Okay, thanks, Jake. Anne?
Yeah, I think also definitely echo what he said. CPG, retail in general, seems to be very, very open. Another thing to think about is kind of differences within departments. So at one of my clients, the marketing department was well known for having a lot of very strong, out and proud people, whereas something like IT, procurement, supply chain is typically a place where you'll find a bit more of a staid, quiet environment that sounds probably more similar to the FSO experience that he had. So I think definitely thinking about like common industries you would think, like media, but also even within industries, departments have a big difference. The other thing I've heard is in general, industrials, oil and gas, they're often headquartered in the southeast, the southwest. The only stories I've heard of people having trouble with clients are from people who've been working with industrials companies. That's one thing to think about.
Okay. And Bobby, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I would also say there might be something around kind of where your client is located geographically. So thinking about my work, the majority of my clients have been in New York, so it hasn't been an issue. We did have one client in Florida, and it was so interesting because when they walked into the boardroom, it was, all middle-aged white men. And that's not to say that they're not accepting, but there is just a bit of a different dynamic when you kind of think about where a company is located and what the culture of the region or the city is as well.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Hey, Daisuke, I'd just like to say exactly what Bobby mentioned, because before I moved to New York, I was living in Oklahoma, which southern, midwestern, wherever you want to place it. But definitely just worth giving a consideration as to where that location is. I was still out at work when I was living in Oklahoma, but it was more of one of those things that and this applies to anything outside of LGBT issues, but kind of handling certain issues at the client site with a certain level of respect, since you are at someone else's place of business, and they just may have a different culture than your office or than you're used to.
Okay, sounds good. And so my next question is about the diversity initiatives that are held by companies and how it's expanding. Would you say that LGBT people bring a different perspective, and how so? Like, do you have any kind of like examples that you're like, oh, okay, LGBT people do have like a different example, or like how this adds to the whole diversity? And anyone can take it. Jake, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, I think companies are starting to recognize a lot more the benefits of LGBT recruiting and having, people that can be open at work about it from probably two perspectives. I mean, we, like my company, both Ernst & Young and Colgate, have participated in the AIDS Walk every year. They're very big on doing those initiatives because I think they understand that when people are able to be comfortable at work and sort of, there's the catchphrase, bring your full self to work, where people feel like they can be there and be open and just be normal and themselves, then they're much more productive, they're much more likely to contribute valuable ideas, they just don't feel like they have to be someone else at work. And so I think companies recognize that, and from all the client sites I've been on and the two companies that I've worked for, I certainly see that openness and desire to promote LGBT events and have Pride events and World AIDS Day events and National Coming Out Day. Definitely a lot of visibility.
Okay. Bobby?
Yeah, and I wonder if the question is less about, does being an LGBT, person brings something additional to the workplace, and more around, well, if you kind of think about these companies and you think about this idea that people are their greatest assets, why would you want to create an environment where anyone is uncomfortable? I think it's more around, want the environment to be comfortable for everyone so that you don't limit anyone's potential, because I really think it comes down to, are you LGBT or not? I think it's more of, are you smart? And if you are LGBT and you are smart, we'll support you, and you'll have a seat at the table, you can have your great idea, and that's what matters more.
Okay, Anne?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Bobby there. I think that's like the main thing. If you think about, BCG, McKinsey, Bain, they're all looking for people who, want to work hard and want to bring great ideas to their client companies, whether that means you're, whatever, anything really. They want you to work for them, and so, it's not, again, there's like very little that you can say that, okay, my subject position as an LGBT person makes me a better able to understand this market or whatever. But the fact is that, we're just people who want to solve problems, and that's the key.
Okay, and so the other question is, I know like not everybody, who identifies as LGBT is flamboyant, but does a flamboyant person also get like the same respect as the person that isn't? And also how many like out senior leadership are there at your firm? And Anne, do you want to take that?
Sure. I mean, I think it's first on the question of out leadership. Like Bain has a number of senior partners who are LGBT, and we know them through the Affinity Network, which is great. And it's great to see that buy-in from the top. And I think you'll probably find that at most other major firms as well, just by numbers perspective. And then in terms of flamboyant, I think in some ways it can be an asset. My first case was with a department store working in men's retail fashion, and one of the consultants on my case was I guess you might call him flamboyant gay man. I think he developed a very good rapport with the head buyer at this department store, because that man was also a fairly flamboyant out gay man. And so I think there are places, I guess it's somewhat contradicting my past statement, there aren't too many things that are unique advantages from being LGBT, but people know what it can bring to the table, and you can use it effectively like any other skill. Like if you're a great golfer, you can make a great client relationship with somebody else who loves golf. So as long as you don't use it to alienate somebody who would obviously be offended by your flamboyance, it seems like it can be an asset, and has been looked upon as such.
Okay. Bobby?
Yeah, this was actually a great question, whoever asked it. And I had to think, pretty diligently about it. And I think if you kind of think about it, there's a certain self that we bring to work and another that we have more informally with our friends and our family. And I don't think it so much matters being flamboyant or not, but I do think, when you're in the workplace, you need to give consideration to how you come off. So for me, for example, that I come off as very young sometimes, and that's something that I'm aware of, once it's just, the question is really around just having awareness of how they are so much there to kind of hear your ideas. So just or not, because I don't think that matters.
Yeah, I think exactly what Bobby said. I mean, ultimately, it's being professional at the workplace, and I mean, flamboyance or your personality, how you carry yourself. I've never seen an instance where that was sort of looked down upon. I just think it's a matter of handling yourself professionally and knowing, how to interact with people, and just like Anne said, building relationships that can ultimately lead to a much easier experience at the client from a work perspective, and a much more fun experience from an interpersonal perspective.
Okay, great. And so I know Bobby brought up the part of his identity is being young and things like that. From each of you, what would you say? How would people describe you, and how do you use that identity towards your advantage at work?
I guess to borrow a British phrase, I would probably be described as a little bit cheeky. I mean that in the most professional workplace way possible. But just like I enjoy talking to people, I enjoy like getting to actually know them. Ultimately, we're all working there together, and so kind of having fun and joking and kind of asking what they did over the weekend, and sharing my experiences, and just kind of being amiable. And I like talking to them, so we have fun, and then everyone's much more relaxed, and everyone's much more willing to share information and kind of be themselves to me as well.
Anne?
Yeah, I'd say definitely it's a difference, like you were saying earlier about professional versus personal. And like on professional teams, I'm the AC, as most people on my teams are, like very focused on getting the data right, making sure the model is what's necessary. In meetings, trying to be as professional and like a value add as possible, because you are 24 with these people who are 45 plus, and I've been doing this for many more years than even alive. And then in the social setting, definitely more of the kind of fun person, like always organizing trips out on the weekend to show my friends who typically go out in the marina what the Castor looks like, what the mission's like.
Bobby, did you have something to say, or?
No, I was just going to say the point around being young. This is actually something that many people will encounter in their first jobs, and I think there's always a way that you can kind of spin it to your advantage. So, for example, there was one client meeting where we had to introduce a bunch of people in the fashion world, very senior, and the CEO of the organization for whom we were working was like, "Oh, why don't you just send Bobby? That would be really funny." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that would be funny. I'm a millennial, and actually their target market of this company, are millennials. So maybe I would have something good to say." So I think in any situation, there's kind of a way you can turn that stigma against being young around and really work it to your advantage.
Okay, thank you. All right, so my next question is, what are some initiatives at your firm, and what does your firm call the LGBT initiatives, and what are some things that that you are involved in? And if you can start off, that'd be great.
Sure. So Bain has a fairly strong affinity network for LGBT identified people called BGLAD, which is like the Bain, I don't know what it stands for, whatever the acronym is. And that, is primarily a twofold, there's essentially two purposes to this organization. One is recruiting, of course, so being able to be there for LGBT recruits throughout the pipeline, be that in the MBA or pre-MBA recruiting season, providing extra support, answering questions. The other is kind of a professional network within the firms that, there are lots of senior leaders at the firm who are LGBT who have worked their way through the firm in generally an environment that was probably, if we just look at time and social standards, a bit more difficult for them. And so they can sort of provide guidance maybe in a bit more personal sense than our normal professional mentors would at work. So generally, a lot of social events, like we'll have pints around, or which is our happy hour around Pride events, or do the AIDS Walk or National Coming Out Day for office awareness, and then just have events focus on professional networking among ourselves, as well as then recruit outreach during recruiting seasons.
And Bobby?
So BCG's network is called LGBTN, for this LGBT network. And I would say if you kind of think about the functions that it serves, it's similar to what Anne described about Be Glad. I think, if I were to say what was the most valuable part of the group to me, it's really more of the informal mentorship. So kind of knowing that you have this vast network that you meet, kind of consistently in some of the affinity events and some of the affinity conferences, and being able to pick up the phone or email them and say, hey, I want to ask you a question about how I should navigate this staffing situation, or how I should kind of run this piece of analysis. And you really do find that there's such a common bond, that people are so overwhelmingly willing to help, that it really becomes such a wonderful network that you can kind of leverage in almost any situation, personal or professional.
And then for Jake, if you can talk about like some of the differences between where you work now and then EY, that would be great.
Sure. So when I was at Ernst & Young, their affinity network is called Beyond, and it's a fairly well-established organization to the extent that they're very involved in community events. But again, I think the most important thing about that organization, as Bobby mentioned, was that informal mentorship. And your first day at the firm, when they say, here's the person to reach out to for the Beyond network, and you go have coffee with that person, you get to know these people in an informal setting, and you always have a resource. And whether it's I'm having an issue at the client site personally and I kind of need to know how to handle it, or I need some, a little bit of guidance professionally, and you've always got that network to reach out to. Where I'm at now at Colgate-Palmolive, our network, for those of you probably know Colgate makes toothpaste. The network is called Smile Out Loud, and it's definitely a much smaller network than at Ernst & Young. It's a lot younger. It's only been around for probably about 5 years now. So still in sort of the exploratory stage, but still very involved in the AIDS Walk, other events. We support GLSEN, which is the Gay Lesbian Straight Education Network, and so still involved in those initiatives. And to really, for a company where this sort of network hasn't been around a long time, it really does give you those relationships with people who have been in the company for a while, know the ropes, and sort of can give you that informal guidance. So while Ernst & Young was much more established than Colgate's network is, I think they all have the same objectives.
All right, so thank you for that. And then, so we're going to transition into just some tips for recruiting, and we'll start off with the consulting first, and then we'll go into accounting. So for the consulting for Anne and Bobby, do you guys have any tips for how to craft your summer internships so that you can have an advantage for recruiting in the fall or the spring? And Bobby, you want to take that one first?
Sure. So I think a lot of people get worried that, if they're not doing, they feel they almost have to be narrow-minded in, the summer internship opportunities they pick to best position themselves to getting a full-time offer or whatnot. And I would say, now being on the other side and seeing how the recruiting mechanism works, there isn't much truth in that. And I think the real reason for that is consulting is so many different things, but at the end of the day, it's really just about problem solving. So in any internship that you have, whether it be for a for-profit company, or spending a summer doing research, or working for a not-for-profit company, there's always an opportunity for you, or there should be an opportunity for you to think critically and to make some kind of positive impact. And I think as long as you can speak to that and to explain what you did. So for example, in my summer, I worked in the public sector, and I worked on a campaign for a local politician, and I was doing fundraising. So I was able to quantify, here's how much we were able to fundraise, and here was my part of it. It wouldn't seem like that's aligned with consulting, but it is, because it was solving a problem and it was kind of driving to an impact. And I think as long as you can do that and speak to it, you'll be all set.
Anne?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with Bobby in terms of you can do whatever you want for your summer internship as long as you really focus on, if you're interested in getting into consulting, finding ways to really improve the organization that you're at, and not just kind of taking the, boilerplate, go make copies, go listen to exactly what your boss tells you to do without any, creative insight from your part type summer. So, if you're working at a nonprofit, think about ways to make that nonprofit run better, and then see if you can actually start an initiative to go fix something that you identified as being inefficient, broken, not suboptimal in some way. Because that really means a lot to consultants, especially, we're looking for people who not just see problems, but come up with ways to actually solve problems and can actually implement the results, or at least find ways to implement the results. So if you could show that, no matter where you are, if that's a research project, if that's a nonprofit, if that's a for-profit, that goes a long way to sort of showing the consulting firm that you have the consulting mindset, which is what they're really looking for more than anything else.
All right, and let's hear from accounting side from Jake.
Yeah, I think a lot of accounting students, whenever they go into the internship process, they're kind of faced with the, am I going to go Big Four or industry? And then if you go Big Four, you say, am I going to do audit or tax? That's always the big question, is audit or tax. And I think what's important for people to realize is, A, if you do an internship in audit, you still can go into tax. It's all about the experience and really learning how to be in a professional environment, which is probably dramatically different from your educational environment, and just understanding the corporate culture, finding out if this is a place where you could see yourself working full-time. So I think looking at it as more of the experience and not so much, if I do an internship at a Big Four accounting firm in audit, that's what I have to do for the rest of my life. I did intern in audit, and then went into audit, and then a bit of advisory, and then over now into industry. So it really is what you make it, and I think that's the same as they said for consulting, is think about how this can help shape your career and how this can really give you an insight into the company and into your profession, and take that experience and then apply it into either looking for a full-time job, or if you get an offer from this place and that's where you want to be, then really how you can develop the skills you took as an intern and position yourself at an even better place once you start full-time.
All right, Jake, and we also have a question here for you from Luke.
Okay.
Luke Brewer. He said, what side of EY were you working in, and why did you leave / what are you doing now at Colgate? And if you can keep your answers brief as well, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Hey, Luke. So when I was at Ernst & Young, I was in our assurance practice, which is the fancy name for audit. And so I was doing all our 10K filings for public companies, things like that. Ultimately, I think I left. I was in the financial services office and wanted to get back into retail and consumer products, which is where I started my career at EY, and had been interested since I'd been there for about 3.5 years, had been interested in seeing something from the industry side. And so I moved over to Colgate. I'm actually in our financial analysis team right now, which is still does the 10Q and 10K financial reporting, but is also over like budgeting and planning, modeling analysis for different accounts, stock-based compensation, things like that. So a little bit of reporting still, but now more so in the financial planning side of things.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that. So for Anne and Bobby, we were wondering, how did you prepare for consulting, for the case interviews, and when did you start? Can you give us like kind of a brief timeline of how you prepared? And if Bobby can start first, that would be great.
Sure. So I went through recruiting during my, I guess what would have been junior spring. And I think there's a lot of upfront work that you need to do. So you really need to make sure that you are networking and that you're meeting the right people and just expressing interest. And then you also need to make sure that your resume is kind of in tip-top shape and that you have everything buttoned up before you submit. So I would say in the fall, you kind of want to work on those two things. And I think for the resume, you know, a part of networking is also kind of building a relationship with someone so that you can kind of reach out to them and say, hey, you know, I'm going through the recruiting process this year. Would you mind taking a look at my resume? Really want to make sure that it's kind of up to the standard that the companies are looking for. And then I think in the spring, you know, I kind of planned my process very traditionally, and I bought Case in Point, which is a book that, you know, many people use to prepare for case interviews. And oftentimes what you'll hear is that you really shouldn't kind of, you know, go too in depth with Case in Point because you don't want to sound templatized or formulaic in the interviews. But I do think there's something nice about the examples in the book. So what you want to do is you want to find a friend who's also going through interviews, and you want to kind of practice cases with one another. And then as you kind of get a little bit better and more polished, you want to reach back out to those people with whom you network and say, hey, you know, fortunately I have an interview. Would it be possible to get 30 minutes on your calendar so that we could go through a mock interview so that I can get your pointers and kind of where I can push a little bit more and what I'm doing well?
Thanks for that. And Anne?
Yeah, I actually had a very similar process as well. Recruited in the spring of my junior year for internship stuff, got an offer from there. Didn't actually go back for my summer at Bain, but had the offer, which kind of took care of my full-time offer as well. In terms of preparation, it was very similar. I didn't buy Case in Point. I took the more like, well, I don't want to be formulaic, so I'm just going to, you know, read The Economist and do a few practice cases with my friends. The other thing that really helped is that internship recruiting is fairly high volume, so luckily, I think this is fairly common, but the major consulting firms recruited toward the end of the process. So I had, you know, a few kind of practice interviews with other firms that are the best type of practice interview because they're live. There's just so much pressure. You know, you still don't know if you're actually going to have a job at the end, so there's still pressure there to make sure you're performing. So thinking about kind of any early interviews that you have, even if you're not as excited about the eventual job, they're still like the best possible practice interviews you can get. So treat those very seriously. So I think probably if I had my Bain interview first of all my interviews, I would never have gotten a job here.
And from the accounting side, Jake, did you want to tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, I think I interned my junior year of college, and going into it, it was a typical recruiting process. Met with all the various Big Four firms, and you know, like Anne said, I think the interviews are a great experience as you go. My first interview, I would be scared to go back and watch a tape of it if I had to. But really, you take a lot from the interview process, and practicing. I mean, mock interviews are always a good way to prep for that. But then, you know, once I got in through recruiting events and going and becoming more familiar with the people that we were there with, then you build a good rapport, and it leads to a great experience.
All right, sounds good. So thank you so much, everyone, for those questions and answers. And so for this section, for the next section, which is like going to be around 5 minutes or so, I have a presentation. It's really a brief chart overview of what you can expect going forward, as well as some of the recruiting dates, what you can be doing over the summer and whatnot. And so for the speakers here, if you can feel free to judge, say your comments or whatnot. I'm gonna do a screen share and have the presentation on. So just let me know if everything is working and if you can all see it. So I'm gonna start off with the accounting one, and Jake, you can feel free to comment on that. But this is the overview of the recruiting schedule. And so for the summer, for everybody, you want to keep polishing your resume and cover letter and continue networking, like Jake said, like everyone else said, network with people that you know, people within the firm that you're working at, and anywhere within your network. And then for around September, October, when school starts, that's when the internships and the full-time recruiting happens for the Big Four. And make sure you want to go to those forums and interviews end by late October, early November. For OUBC, for those that are going, it'll be a good time in between those initial interview offers or initial first round interviews, and then the last ones that you confirm. It'll be a good time to bridge those and continue to network during that gap. And then for current freshmen who are watching the videos, apply for the Big Four summer programs that are going to be offered during January, February. That's when the applications come out, and those are for the summer, and you get to travel across the country, and it's good stuff. So, Jake, anything else to add?
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I mean, it really is about building those relationships early on, and so as a freshman, sophomore, if you can start getting to know those people during all the recruiting sessions, then you're setting yourself up well as sophomore, junior year to have a really nice and smooth recruiting experience.
Great, thank you. And so now this is the consulting recruiting. I've split this up into two, so the summer internship recruiting and full-time recruiting, because they happen at different times. And so for those that are going to be getting summer internships for the junior or the summer after their junior year, make sure during the end of the summer you're polishing your resume, but also getting recommendations from managers on LinkedIn. That's just like a small tip, I guess. And then in the October time, start practicing cases with peers. I'll talk a little bit about future programs for consulting cohort. We're going to have case interview practices among the cohort members as well, so that'll help you out. And that'll be in the summer, so it'll be even earlier than some people. And then during the winter break, spend your time wisely to practice those case interviews, behavioral interviews. And then come January, February, that's when the info sessions, the resume drops, first round interviews, and second round interviews come out. So that's that for summer internship recruiting. I'll be sending out this file as well later on, so you don't have to like take all this notes down as well. And then finally, for full-time recruiting, that's the schedule. Summer is around the same thing, but in August, that's when the companies are going to be having their info sessions. So probably September, August, September, around that time, depending on when your school starts. And then first round interviews and second round interviews. So full-time recruiting for those that are currently juniors, make sure that you're preparing over the summer as well as into the fall. And so that was a little bit about the recruiting schedule. And so this one is talking about some of the future programming specific to O4U for both accounting and consulting cohorts. So both of the cohorts are going to be having 101 accounting consulting 101 webinar, and that goes a little bit more in depth with the recruiting schedules and like how everything works, how to network and stuff like that. These presentations were originally hosted at the OUBC conference, but the organizers moved it earlier so that people can get these in time for recruiting and are more prepared for during the networking sessions at OUBC. And then we'll also have other programmings, like for accounting, there's more information about advisory and consulting services within the industry, and then summer hangouts. For consulting, we'll have the case interview practice, and so for those that are interested, I'll pair you guys up with each other according to skill and whatnot, and I'll send out more information through email. And then finally, we'll have some newsletters and stuff bi-monthly or things like that. So with that said, I forgot to ask, does Anne and Bobby have anything to add to the consulting side?
I mean, so from my side,
okay, and if not, that's totally fine. Oh, yeah.
I guess like, so think about how you're being perceived by us. So typically the first round interviews are decided by, I'm not sure the same with BCG, I imagine it is, by people who are essentially a year or two older than you, who are your peers. Like, we read the resumes, we read the transcripts, and really the only thing we see from you is your cover letter, your resume, and your transcript. Like, you might have relationships with people which can help you, but really making sure that your grades are good, and you're taking hard classes, that your resume really is tight and conveys the fact that you have taken leadership positions and have really, achieved results in the organizations you're a part of, goes a long way. It's really what we should be focusing on. And as much as networking and social media is important, like those two things really are the most important, is the transcript and the resume.
Great. And Bobby, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Anne said, and I would just maybe add one piece of really valuable advice that I got when I was going through the recruiting process is that you should treat the process or an additional class. You should be regimented in the way you think about it and structured, and make sure you're really setting aside the time that it warrants. And I do think there's truth to that. It is a very short and intense process. You do want to be kind of as well-oiled of a machine as you can be, so that in the end, your hard work is off.
Great. Sounds good. Thank you so much. And so let me just see if we have any last. Oh, sorry about Let me just see if we have any last minute questions on the post. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have any more questions. If you guys have other questions, feel free to email me, and I can forward it to any of the speakers, and I'll ask how they can connect with how you can connect with the speakers as well. With that said, that finishes it up for this webinar. I did want to put a small note that so Adam Moreau is the student coordinator leader for all of us. And I know he was mentioning for the accounting cohorts, if you are interested in becoming the accounting cohort leader and working with Jake into setting up some of the webinars that are coming up later in the year, feel free to email me and I'll definitely forward it to the right people. We are still looking for someone, and so if you feel like you're the fit, just let me know. And also for the consulting cohort members, I'll be sending out more information about that and like a follow-up email, so feel free to look at that. And with that said, thank you all for coming to the webinar. Appreciate it. For those that still have finals, good luck and have a great summer. We'll stay in touch. Thank you, everybody.